It started with a knock, loud, impatient, and way too early for a Saturday morning. I opened the door, still half asleep, and found two uniformed officers standing on my porch. "We've had a complaint from the HOA," one of them said, glancing down at a clipboard. "They say your front porch is a safety hazard and needs immediate repair." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "What HOA?" "See, here's the thing. My ranch property isn't part of any HOA. Never was. I double-checked when I bought the place years ago, but apparently, the neighborhood next to mine has a board that thinks their authority stretches beyond their own fence." What made this even crazier was that I hadn't filed any permits, submitted any plans, or had any reason to think I was doing something wrong. My porch was old, sure, had a couple creaky steps and some peeling paint, but it was my porch, on my land, with no HOA ties in sight. Still, these people weren't just complaining. They had actually gotten law enforcement involved. The officers weren't aggressive, but they were confused. They said the HOA provided photos, claimed there were code violations, and even mentioned possible fines. I told them to hold tight, went inside, and pulled out the original deed and property records. No HOA, no shared governance, nothing. But this was only the beginning. What happened next turned this headache into one of the strangest, most unexpected wins I've ever had, and the HOA ended up paying the price, literally. After the officers left, kind of shrugging and admitting there wasn't much they could do, I started digging to figure out what on earth triggered all this. I walked over to the edge of my property where the fence separates my ranch from a newer housing development. That's where I met Nancy, one of the newer residents who'd always waved but never really talked. She looked uncomfortable, almost like she'd been waiting to say something. She told me the HOA president, a guy named Greg, had driven by my place a few times and told folks at their last meeting that the porch next door was bringing down property values. According to Nancy, he called it an eyesore and said he was working on getting it taken care of. Funny how getting it taken care of meant calling the cops on private land that wasn't even within his jurisdiction. To be clear, my ranch had been here decades before the HOA development ever popped up. My land records showed no easements, no governing documents, nothing tying me to their rules. But it didn't stop them from trying to act like they owned the whole area. Greg apparently told residents that if I didn't fix it, they would make sure I did. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a porch, it was about power. And Greg was using the HOA as his personal tool to pressure neighbors who didn't fall in line. What he didn't know was, I wasn't about to just let that happen. A few days after the whole cop visit, I started noticing things. Cars would slow roll past my driveway, usually during evening hours. One time, I caught Greg himself parked across the road, just sitting in his SUV, talking on the phone and staring right at my porch. He didn't wave, didn't even try to be subtle. That's when I knew this wasn't just HOA business, it was personal. I kept wondering what made him feel like he had that kind of authority over someone who wasn't even part of his community. Meanwhile, a few of the HOA members, people like Nancy, started quietly reaching out to me. One even dropped off a printout of their last board meeting minutes, which actually mentioned my property by name. Greg had told the board that I'd refused to cooperate with HOA visual standards and was creating tension in the neighborhood. That's when it clicked. He wasn't just trying to push me around. He was trying to make me an example. I decided to document everything. Photos of my porch, video of the SUV outside, screenshots of emails and messages from residents. If this ever got serious, I needed proof. The irony was, I had been planning to redo the porch anyway. But now it wasn't just a home improvement project, it was a defense strategy. As I pieced together the bigger picture, a pattern started to form. Greg wasn't just harassing me, he had done this before, to people in his own HOA, and now he was trying to expand that reach onto land he didn't even control. The more I dug, the messier it got. Turns out, Greg had been leveraging the HOA's budget to quietly fund neighborhood improvements without proper votes, security patrols, landscaping extras, even some legal consultations. When I heard that from Nancy, I asked her straight, has he ever used HOA money to go after someone outside the neighborhood? She hesitated, then nodded. You're not the first, she said quietly. That was the moment I knew I needed backup. I reached out to a local property rights attorney. When I explained the situation, she nearly laughed and said, "They've got zero jurisdiction over you." But then she saw the board meeting minutes and the copy of the anonymous letter I received telling me to comply or face escalating action. Her tone changed. "This borders on harassment," she said. "And possibly misuse of funds, the kicker?" A few days later, I received a letter. Not certified, not official, just printed on HOA letterhead, demanding I make porch repairs within 10 days or face a community action. Whatever that meant. But here's where it got even more unbelievable. I got a call from someone on the HOA finance committee, a guy named Ben. He was nervous but fed up. He told me there was a line item in their budget labeled community compliance support. Money that, it turned out, was being used for the campaign against me. That's when everything came to a head. I wasn't just being pressured. I was unknowingly being funded by the same people trying to take me down. The call from Ben had already shaken things up, but what he said next nearly stopped me in my tracks. "You didn't hear it from me," he said, "but part of that budget allocation came from a reimbursement grant tied to a county beautification fund." I paused. "Wait, county funds? Like taxpayer money?" He confirmed it. That meant Greg had been funneling public grant money through the HOA and using it, at least in part, to harass someone outside of their jurisdiction. Me now, it wasn't just a case of an overreaching HOA president trying to control a neighbor's porch. It was potentially fraudulent use of public funds. That turned my personal issue into something way bigger. I wasn't just dealing with a power-hungry guy anymore. I was sitting on something that could blow open a misuse of community money on a whole new level to make things more surreal. The very next day, I came home to a contractor's van parked outside my fence. The guy said he was sent by the board to assess porch repairs. I laughed. Honestly, couldn't help it. "Who's paying you?" I asked. He showed me a work order. Guess what? It listed the HOA's name and the county beautification grant as the funding source. It was clear Greg never expected anyone to look into the numbers or ask questions. And now, not only had he dragged me into his mess, but he had accidentally involved the county. Suddenly, this porch was no longer just mine. It was the key to uncovering something much bigger. The moment I got my hands on that work order, I knew it was time to act. I forwarded everything, emails, photos, HOA letters, and Ben's tip, straight to the county oversight office. Within a week, they launched a quiet investigation. I didn't hear much at first, but I kept an eye on Greg. Suddenly, the HOA board meetings went private. Residents were no longer getting minutes, and people started whispering. Greg was getting nervous. Then it happened. I got a call from a local reporter who'd caught wind of the probe. Turns out I wasn't the only one Greg had targeted using HOA funds. He'd done something similar to a couple of other homeowners, too, one of whom had quietly settled months ago. The reporter asked if I'd speak on the record. I agreed, and by the following Monday, the story broke. Greg tried to spin it, but the emails, board minutes, and misused grant money did the damage. The county froze the HOA's access to public funds pending a full audit. Residents were furious, demanding his resignation. And me? Well, the porch that started all this became front-page news, especially when the county sent an official notice confirming that they had never approved use of those funds for off-property work. But the twist? A few days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA. It wasn't a complaint, it was a check. Apparently, Greg had authorized payment for the porch upgrade under their own compliance budget. So technically, they paid for the whole thing. So there I was, standing on my brand new porch, looking out over my ranch, and realizing the whole mess had come full circle. What started as a strange HOA complaint about a porch they had no control over turned into a public scandal, a news headline, and ironically, a home improvement project paid for by the same people trying to tear me down. Greg eventually resigned from the HOA board for personal reasons, and while no criminal charges came down, the county's audit forced the HOA to change how they handled funds. Residents started demanding transparency, and some even apologized. To me, for how things played out, I never wanted a fight. I just wanted to fix up my place and be left alone. But when someone tries to misuse power and drag others down with them, you've got to stand up. That's what this whole story really came down to. Standing your ground when you know you're in the right, and not letting titles or loud voices intimidate you off your own property. My porch is solid now. Looks better than it ever has. And every time I sit out there with a coffee or grill up something for friends, I can't help but laugh a little at how things turned out. The HOA that tried to force me to fix my porch ended up funding it,